Good morning to you all. This is Monday, January 18th, and we are celebrating and commemorating the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King today. A couple of announcements in terms of the church. So there's a Christian Ed meeting this evening, which will talk about Sunday school for the winter and spring, as well as probably thinking ahead a little bit about Vacation Bible School, some of the issues related to that. We surely hope that by then the vaccine rollout will have been very dramatic. So we don't know yet, but we certainly hope that things can be quite different by the summer, even by the late spring if we're lucky. I will be doing Bible study on Zoom at 6 o'clock tomorrow, and we're looking at the book of 2 Peter. Would love to have you involved in that. We've got about 8 people right now that regularly come on. Plenty of room for others, and we're having a good time. Saturday, this coming, which will be the 23rd, we'll be pre-recording the service for Sunday the 24th, and we're going to be celebrating or commemorating again the festival we call the Conversion of Paul. That day actually falls on Monday, but I've been moving all these commemorations to Sunday so that we can observe them. And so then on Sunday, it looks like the weather's going to be pretty chilly, but it should be non-stormy. And so we'll just bundle up and we'll gather at noon on Sunday the 24th and do a little mini pageant about the conversion of Paul and sing our 4 hymns. So that's what's coming up. February 6th, there will be a food drive to help the agencies in town that distribute food, as well as a grinder and chili sale. And the money from that will also go to the same project. The church continues to try to reach out to our neighbors and ease their burdens in this, what's been a pretty difficult time for a lot of folks. So I may think of other things that need to be shared, but I'll be here this week, Monday through Thursday, 10 o'clock. Hope you can join us. A prayer here this morning from a fellow named G.K. Chesterton, very important churchman who died in 1936. Quite an influence on a lot of people, G.K. Chesterton. So this is a poem. It's actually written. It's a prayer written in a kind of poetic format, and I think sometimes it's been set to music actually. So here's the prayer. O God of earth and altar, bow down and hear our cry. Our earthly rulers falter, our people drift and die. The walls of gold entomb us, the swords of scorn divide. Take not thy thunder from us, but take away our pride. From all that terror teaches, from lies of tongue and pen, from all the easy speeches that comfort cruel men, from sale and profanation of honor and the sword, from sleep and from damnation, deliver us, good Lord. Amen. Well, I went on my Facebook this morning, as I often do. I greet people on their birthdays and, see what clever little things have been put up, or follow some of my friends in the goings-on, comings of their lives, and so on. And I found this morning a link which led me to the letter from the Birmingham jail. This long letter that was written by, I'm going to call him not Dr. King today, though he certainly deserves that honor, but I'm going to call him Pastor King. I don't hear that very often, but that's what he was. He was a Baptist pastor. And that role animated his work. And so as a fellow pastor, I'm moved by how his faith informed his work. And so he was in prison in Birmingham, in the jail there, during one of the protests, nonviolent protests, of course. That was always part of his philosophy. It's a longish letter directed to clergymen, Christian and Jewish clergy people who had written him a letter basically questioning whether he was causing too much trouble, whether he was inciting violence, whether he was being impatient, and those kind of things. And he answers those critiques very gently, but very straightforwardly, powerfully. It's a letter that has grace in it and love, but also does not shy from speaking the truth. I would encourage any of you to pull that up. It's got to be online in a number of places. The letter from the Birmingham jail by Martin Luther King Jr. And read that whole letter, even if you're not a clergy person. As well as pulling up on YouTube a number of his speeches to listen to them, not in snippets and sound bites, but to really try to grasp the depth of this man's thinking and his intent. Because, and I'm encouraging this partly because I see this happen a lot. We idolize people, especially dead people, and kind of tend to forget the depth of their commitment or the challenge of their call to us. Some of the greatest leaders of society, they kind of get pigeonholed. And so today there's just this overwhelming kind of, Dr. King, we're so proud that Dr. King led us through, to a more integrated society. I mean, look, we've had a black president, we've had a black secretary of state, we've got a black vice president. What progress we've made, and we have made progress. I mean, I'm not going to ever suggest we haven't made progress. The military is fully integrated. Sports teams are fully integrated. Of course, we remember a time when that wasn't so. Neither of those things were so. Many of our neighborhoods have become integrated. There's no question progress has been made. But it's very easy sometimes to sit back and say, well, it's good that we had good people like King to help us get to this place that's better. And it is. But we're not there. We're just not there. So I was reminded, of course, in thinking about him, that during his life, he was not loved by lots and lots and lots of American people. I mean, lots of people. He wasn't loved by a lot of black people who were not convinced by his nonviolent commitment. There was a whole segment of the African American community who wanted to leave the option of violence on the table. I think Malcolm X said something to that effect. That they wanted to achieve justice by any means necessary, and King said no, only by this means, only by nonviolent means. So there was a tension within the black community about his work. And of course, there was a lot of opposition from white America to what he was doing and saying. He was very much scorned. He was called all kinds of names. He was called a communist, and as I just said, even clergy people would write to him and say, "Are you sure? I mean, really, there's a lot of trouble brewing, especially in the cities of the South, but not only there, but those were the dramatic images we saw." There was a lot of discomfort, and obviously resulting finally in his vivid and horrible assassination in broad daylight in Memphis. I was 20 when that happened, and I was in a period of my life when I was really finally beginning to read and ponder the words of Jesus as though they were meant to influence the way I lived my life and shape my values. I was becoming a young, I don't even know what to use the word mature exactly, but I was in a process of maturation in my faith and really deciding that I wanted to be a serious Christian for real. Not just the accidental product of a Sunday school or a confirmation class, but a really committed adult Christian person. That's what I wanted my life to be like. So it was right at that time that all of this was going on. And I have to say, I didn't ever put my body on the line. for the things King was talking about. I never went to a place that was dangerous. I didn't go to a freedom ride. I was never arrested or gassed or beaten or bitten or, and fire hosed or all the things that were happening to his direct and immediate followers. But I did feel, I felt that what he said was right, and I deeply felt that his methods were right. And I've never changed that. I mean, I believe the cause of justice is critical for all of us, and I believe that the nonviolent means are especially for Christian people, the means by which we do not sully the movement or the outcome by doing damage and injustice to others in the process. So I count myself as a supporter of his, although I can't claim to have ever put myself in any real jeopardy to do that. One of the things I think is important to remember about King is that he was far more than just an advocate for racial tolerance or integration or racial justice. He was that, of course. But King, especially toward the end of his life, in the last couple of years, he had begun to really link up some other issues. So when he was killed, in fact, he had gone down to Memphis, not for a specific black-white kind of thing, not specifically just a racial issue. He was part of what was called the Poor People's Campaign. And what he'd gone down there to organize a protest about was the poor reimbursement or payment salary levels of garbage collectors in Memphis. Because what had happened in the last few years of his life is he had begun to be very articulate about the linkage between poverty and racial injustice and a too ready commitment to a kind of violent or militaristic style of society. He understood that there was somehow a tie, a deep and abiding tie between the various kinds of injustices that left a lot of people, both white, black, and other, in poverty, the kinds of injustices that left African Americans aside from the promises of America, and the kind of problems that occurred when violence was either glorified or too quickly utilized, whether it would be by a mob, whether it would be by the police, whether it would be by he was opposed to the Vietnam War, so whether it would be used by a nation in an appropriate way. So he was linking all that together, and that was one of the reasons he was so desperately hated by so many people. There was an honest-to-goodness possibility that if his ideas had taken root, the United States would face huge changes in the ways that people were treated, both of all races. I don't even like to say, I shouldn't say that. I'm not a believer in race in that sense. I mean, there are different ethnicities and different national origins, but I believe in the human race. So King was a challenge. And I think he would want to be remembered as a challenge. Not as a kind of an easy self-congratulation like, wow, what a great thing that we in America were able to raise up such a great man and to lead us into such great progress. But rather, in the Birmingham jail letter, he calls himself a nonviolent disturber of the peace for the purposes of achieving real justice for all people, real equality and real justice for all people. And if he were alive today, he'd still be fighting all those same battles because poverty is still tearing the soul out of whole segments of the society. Racial injustice exists. It still does exist in lots of places and in lots of ways, and it's tearing the heart out of both the people who suffer from it and the people who impose it. And the glorification of violence, I mean, goodness sakes, look everywhere, in every corner of America. I mean, there are people, and this would include people of all various political stripes, I think, who really have a fascination and even a glorification of violence, and who really don't think that you can get anything serious done without spilling some blood. So he would remain a challenge, a very serious challenge to us today. And he should. And we should allow that to happen. We should allow ourselves to be challenged. So that when the opportunity is obvious to us, and when the Spirit moves in us, and we would be willing to speak and act in a way that seeks the true dignity and equality of all human beings, men and women and children and people of various skin colors and languages and religions and so on, to lift everybody up. And to do so, not just in a sort of theoretical way, but I mean lift up their standards of living, lift up their opportunity for education, lift up their opportunity for medical care, lift up their opportunity for a fully integrated life with their neighbors of all kinds, and at the same time do all of that in a way that calls into question our really sort of knee-jerk fallback position to fight, always fight, violence and guns and bombs and tanks and, there's got to be a better way. And I believe he showed a better way. I believe Christ showed a better way. We also have Gandhi, of course, who's not a small part of this. King studied Gandhi. Now, Gandhi wasn't a Christian or an American, but Gandhi did understand in the generation prior that you could bring about massive change without killing anybody. And King bought that, and I buy it. And we should buy it, I think. I think we should do that. So let's celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King, Pastor King, for the ways in which he pushed us. And if we listen to his words carefully today, they'll push us still. Push us. We're not where we need to be. We're better as a society, but we're not where we need to be. We're not where our best instincts can guide us to be. We're not where our God calls us to be. We're not where our national documents call us to be. We're not the more perfect union yet that we are supposed to be seeking. We do not yet embrace the idea that all people, I'm not going to say all men at this point, all people are created equal and ought to have a full equality of dignity and legal protection and opportunity. We're just not there. And churches and schools and businesses and the government, we all need to be working together to bring about a much fuller version of what Pastor King talked about in that beautiful speech. I believe it was 1963, if I'm not mistaken. I Have a Dream. I still get goosebumps when I hear that speech, and I hear it. I don't just read it. I pull it up on YouTube or something, and I listen to it, and I'm just moved. I'm moved and inspired. He did that for us. The other speech, by the way, that you might want to pull up on YouTube, if you haven't seen it recently, Robert Kennedy, was running for president that year, 68. And he was scheduled to give a speech. I don't remember now. It might have been Indianapolis, but it was to a largely African-American crowd. And King was murdered that day, the day of that speech. And Bobby Kennedy, as I read this story, was warned that it was, if the crowd turned violent on him, there wouldn't be enough security to protect him. A white guy standing up in front of a black crowd on the day that King was murdered. But Bobby Kennedy insisted that he would go ahead with that speech, and he would be the one to break the news to the crowd. And he did that, and there was no violence. And it's worth listening to that speech in the way that he framed the whole event and the whole conversation, and the way he invited his listeners into something other than a violent bloodletting response. Of course, Bobby himself, just a little bit later that year, was gunned down in broad daylight again, as was his brother, as was Malcolm X, again, violence has just been the go-to method in America a lot of times for addressing grievances. And both King and Bobby Kennedy said, there's another way, and there is another way. And let's celebrate that way too, and let's insist upon that way. And let's not be afraid to use either words or actions as long as they do not bring harm, but hold up the possibility of a truly nonviolent revolution that makes the world more of the place that Jesus envisioned, that our political documents envision, and that Pastor King allowed us to think about too. Peace and honor, justice and dignity be yours this day.